And one of the things that kind of prompted this whole webinar was some discussion Derek and I have seen ongoing lately on the Electrical Estimators Forum that we get from LinkedIn. A lot of discussion about this particular topic, so we thought it was a good time maybe for not only put our own 2 cents in, but maybe to help to clarify and talk about some of the issues that were being discussed with pricing services. So one of the things that came up, especially in the dialogue we saw with the LinkedIn website, the forum on the electrical estimators, was terminology. We just wanted to try to clarify some of the terminology that you see in the industry. The four on the left are all basically the same. In the industry, you'll hear the term the trade price, column 3, end column, and suggested wholesale. Now, I'll have to admit to my background, which dates me back in the industry to working with trade service and the price books. For those of you in the audience who are maybe more than 40 years old or so, you're probably familiar with those price books that they're still out there. But those books have price columns in them. The last column in the contractor book is called the end column. It's also called column 3 because in some pages they have 3 different columns of pricing. And then we also call it the trade price. It actually is the suggested wholesale price. It is a published price. So every manufacturer publishes pricing. If you go to the Square D Digest, for example, it's got the trade price in there. It's the suggested wholesale price. So pretty much all of the manufacturers of electrical materials publish pricing. Now, we all know that has nothing to do with, or is often not even close to what you actually buy things for, but it is an established number that we can all agree on it because it comes from the manufacturer. Now, the numbers on the right there are really more about what we're trying to get to, which is what we call at Vision, we call the target price. Other terms I've heard of the market price and the average cost. These are numbers that you're going to see in the different services that represent an average cost of what a contractor would buy materials for. And we're going to get into some discussion on how to manage that and how accurate it is and that kind of thing. But so you can think of trade price as MSRP, suggested price.
Brian?
Yep.
Brian?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Brian, sorry. 15 to 20 seconds ago, you dropped out a bit. If you don't mind reprising that, I got verification that did happen.
Okay, so we'll talk. I'll repeat this a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll stop the webcam. I just got a message that said that the webcam may be slowing down my communication, so I'm gonna.
That's fine. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and hide the webcam. So all the terms on the left are about published pricing. The manufacturer establishes a trade price. We also call it column 3 from the days when we used the trade service price books. They also called it the end column price. It is a suggested wholesale price that's published by the manufacturer. The other side of the screen are some of the terms you'll hear for the average cost, or what we call in Epic at Vision we call the target price. It's an average cost. And you'll also hear the term market price. They're all basically trying to get to a more realistic price that you could use for estimating and monitoring your pricing. Okay, so 2 of the options with pricing are to use the discounted price provided by the pricing service. Again, it would be the target price or the market price or the average cost. The other option, which used to be a fairly common option, I don't think it is so much today, is to manage your discounts. And I've seen discussion again about people who go in to their estimating systems and put discounts in that are provided by the supplier. Now, those discounts could be discounts that are applied to commodities like conduit and wire, or they could be discounts that are applied across the board for particular manufacturers. So, they may tell you that on your Leviton devices you're going to get 40% off, on your Rayco boxes you're going to get 30% off, on your Square D you're going to get 50% off, whatever the numbers are. Now, there's 2 problems with that. Well, I guess we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it's very difficult to set that up, very time consuming. And the other issue with it is that rarely do those discounts apply across the board. you may get a general discount of 40% on your Levington devices, but I know for a fact that there will be some devices that are higher and some that are lower. So they'll give you actual prices that are not necessarily tied directly to discounts. Okay, so what a pricing service provides basically is a cost, an average cost based on what contractors are buying materials for across the country. There is some zoning of materials, but for the most part, we've approached it on a national basis. In Epic, our pricing service, we call it the target price, and again, you'll see the market price, which is updated again by other pricing services. So basically, you have two options to manage your pricing in your estimating system. You can either use a pricing service, which will give you a national average cost, or the other extreme, and I've seen this more often than you might imagine, is a contractor will get a quote, a price on every item for every job in addition to the lighting and gear. We understand that you need to get a quote on your lighting and your gear packages and any kind of a special system like that. But I've worked with contractors who produce an estimate, and on every estimate, whether it's got 20 items or 220 items, they send it over to the wholesaler, usually by fax or email. They price up every item for them, they send it back to them, and they plug those numbers into their bid. Now, it's obviously very time consuming. I guess it ensures the ultimate in accuracy, at least from that one wholesaler, but it's a very, very time consuming way to do things. So most of us have accepted that the more efficient way to do it is to manage your prices electronically with the pricing service. And the fact of the matter too is that the prices will vary, from one wholesaler to another, so just getting a quote from one supplier isn't going to necessarily be the best way to go there. So really I think what we want to talk about here is to see if there's a way to marry the different options with pricing. Two of the options that are out there are called custom pricing and net pricer. So I just wanted to define those first, and then we're going to show you a little example of what they are. Now, what at Vision we call custom pricing is an option that you would work with your wholesaler on, and you can do it with more than one. You would contact the wholesaler and ask them to download a file or to give you a link to their system to download the pricing, and then you load those prices into your pricing service. So in addition to having the trade price, the wholesale price, the published price, and the target price, the average cost, you'd also have that wholesaler's price. And you could actually do more than one. Now, they won't cover everything in the system, but at least for the items that they have in their inventory, you'd have their cost. Now, another service is called Net Pricer, and we do integrate with that on our estimating program. But Net Pricer is a internet-based service where you subscribe to Net Pricer with the company that produces that software, and then you link to one or more of your suppliers. And the way it works is on a job-by-job basis, you submit a bill of material through Net Pricer to the wholesalers you work with, and it comes back with pricing on the items that they have in their inventory. So it won't price every item in your bid, but it will price the items that they have pricing on, and it comes back over the internet pretty much instantly. So it's a live system. It's not like you've got a fixed price that's good for a day or a week or a month. It's the price that's in that system at that point in time. And I'll show you that in a minute, so you'll see the difference between the two services or the two options. So let me show you custom pricing first in Epic, how it flows through to EBM. So just an example of what custom pricing would look like here. Okay, so way over to the right here, you see the trade price. The target price is what's in Epic that we've established as a national average. Then you see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different suppliers' pricing. And you can see they range all over the place. Some of these prices are from older files. I just wanted you to get the idea of how you could have different price columns for different suppliers. and then they would sit right next here to the target price. And when you're doing a bid, you can tell it to use one of these prices. So the way that would work in the estimating program is when you go to the job extension. Okay, so I'm going to pick one of my suppliers. I'm going to pick this one called Yale Electric. So what it's going to do when I run my report here, it's going to plug in the Yale prices. This is a supplier where they've provided me with pricing. There we go. So
I have a question that I can overlap with what you're doing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was, do you export or integrate with other estimating programs?
Does what export?
I imagine Epic.
Epic certainly does, yes. Epic will update all of the other major estimating programs. And the reason for that is every item in the database has what we call a UPC number. If I double-click on this number, you'll see down here this UPC number. It's an 11-digit number. That's a standard number that is used throughout the industry, from the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the contractor's estimating program. So these are standard part numbers here. So if that UPC number is in the wholesaler system, then it would go into Epic, and then Epic would be able to update it. So Epic covers about 2 million items. So it's going to cover pretty much everything that's in your estimating program. So there's what the report looks like with the Yale pricing. Got $27,000 in material. If I change it back to the standard target pricing, we'll just see what the level would have been. So at target price, the target price from Epic, it was $29,000. When I used one of my local wholesalers, it dropped down to $27,000 plus. So it dropped maybe a little less than 10%. Now, again, we have another option called Net Pricer you can incorporate through here. So when I do the job extension here, I can say use my Net Pricer price. Now my supplier here doesn't have a real name. That is real numbers, but it's a supplier that we just gave them a generic name. So when I do this extension here, you're going to see that it actually, it's asking me to see if I want to refresh my prices. So what it's going to do now, it's going to open up through the internet, go to that supplier's data that's in NetPricer, and bring in the pricing for this little job. So it priced all but 4 items. And let's see what happens to the price there. So it dropped another couple $1,000s. So this is obviously a pretty competitive supplier. So through the job extensions, you can use the target price from Epic, you can use a custom price from Epic, or you can use a NetPricer internet connection where it brings in those prices. Is that clear, Derek? I'm not sure I'm getting the message across. You there?
Yeah, I think so, and maybe this, I might have something to help clarify it, but first a question from an attendee here is, sure, what you're doing, is that changing the audit trail as well?
I have to look. I guess it probably does. Let's look at that. So there's MC cable, because the audit trail has pricing. Yeah, it did. It did. So the audit trail is updated as well, because you can see the total at the bottom of the audit trail. That's the same as the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet.
And this is the Pro version. Does it affect the Plus or Standard?
Plus and Pro would be the same. I think, I'm not sure we have those options in the Standard version.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But how I understood what you were doing, you were just changing the source, or the source of the pricing that
right,
that UBM was using.
The target price comes from Epic. Any of these custom prices are custom prices that are stored in Epic and brought into this estimate. And then you also have the Net Pricer option, which goes out over the internet to a particular supplier and brings their pricing in. Now, the other thing you can do is what we call a price comparison. I can see up to 3 suppliers plus the target price on the screen at the same time. So I've already chosen the net pricer option here. That's distributor one. And I've got two wholesalers with prices, custom pricing from Epic. I won't refresh it again because we just did. So now what you'll see on the screen is the target price in the first column. Distributor 1, that's my net pricer price. XYZ supply house, and I've got one called J.H. Larson. So you'll see all four prices right across the screen, and what it does on each line, it puts in green the one who's got the lowest price. So you can just go down the screen and see who's competitive and who's not. Again, this distributor 1 is a pretty competitive price. Now, in the estimating software,
the scrolling is updating a little slow.
Oh, I imagine it is, yeah. Well, it's working fine on my end now.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It was really slow there for a couple minutes. It was like going from one screen to there was taking like 10 seconds. So in the estimating program, you have the option to use the target price across the board, use a particular distributor across the board. In this case, if I do the lowest overall, it would be the same as distributor 1 because they're the lowest overall. Or I can even tell it to cherry pick. I can say use the lowest individual price on every item. Now that's a pretty risky way to bid, but you know, sometimes if you're trying to get really competitive, you can go down and tell it to choose the lowest price on every line, or use one of the particular suppliers down here at the bottom. If nothing else, it just gives you a good little overview of the job, either maybe at the time you're bidding it, or when you're going out to buy materials. One of the points I was hoping to get across during this webinar is that I think a lot of people don't spend as much time as they could or should monitoring their prices, either because they don't have a tool like Epic that has an average cost, or they're not taking the time to do it. I know that if I were to sit down with any of your offices and take 10 invoices randomly off out of your files, we would find quite a few items that you paid more than the target price for. And the target price is just a benchmark. You can usually do a little bit better. Derek reminded me of one of the little stories I told about a contractor I was trading with a couple of years ago down in Florida. Just happened to have an invoice out on the desk, and I noticed it was for a special dimmer, some kind of a Lutron dimmer, and they had paid about they paid about $150 for this dimmer, and I just thought, you know, that looks a little bit suspicious. So sure enough, we looked it up in Epic, and it was about $50. And I said, well, you might want to check before you pay this invoice with another wholesaler. And sure enough, they called just the next wholesaler that they deal with, and it was about $50, right? Real close to what it was in Epic. So if they hadn't checked it, I think they bought 3 of these, so you know it was 3 times $150 versus 3 times $50. It was a significant amount of money just for checking the price. If you didn't do that, it'd be real hard to catch that kind of a thing. So let's get back to our slideshow here, Derek.
Brian,
yeah,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So maybe don't jump into the slideshow just
okay.
yet, just in case.
Go ahead.
One of the questions is why you made a comment earlier about using that lowest individual
yep.
price to use there, and about it being risky. And one of our viewers asked, well, why is it risky? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay, so if I tell it to use the lowest individual price, that means it may pick 10 items from supplier A, 10 items from supplier B, and 10 items from supplier C. Well, suppliers A and B may not supplier A may not honor the price from B and C. So if he's low on some items, he may not honor, he may not go down to the lowest level of the other suppliers on the other items that they were competitive on. Does that make sense?
I think so. I guess a follow-up question might be, could you buy, from each of the different suppliers?
You could. And then the risk is that sometimes they won't give you their best pricing unless you place the whole order with them. A lot of that's not probably the common, but it's not unusual either that, if they give you a quote on the whole job, and you say, well, I'm only going to buy 10 of the 30 items from you, then they very well may come back and say, well, that pricing isn't good anymore.
Or it won't be good next time, or maybe they'll adjust your pricing tier.
But the bottom line is, if you have that information as the contractor, you're in a much better position to negotiate than if you don't. If you know that there's other prices out there that are better, or if you know that the average price that a contractor is paying across the country is better than what they're quoting you, you've got a lot more negotiating power than you do if you don't know that. And the only other way to get it is to do what I mentioned before, is to get a quote on each item on each job. That's not very efficient either. So I think using one of the options to have your local supplier's pricing incorporated is really the best way to go. If nothing else, at least compare to the target price. And then if you can compare the target price to 1 or 2 or 3 of your local wholesalers, you're going to have a pretty efficient and pretty competitive pricing across the board.
Yeah, I have 2 people asked kind of the same question, and one asked kind of, I think it might be a follow-up, I'm not sure. So really quickly, show the lowest individual price to show how much may be risked by using it. Maybe he means the dollar amount.
Yeah. So if I tell it to use the lowest individual pricing, that number is going to be, okay, so then we go to...
Is it at the end? You have to scroll to the right, maybe?
Yeah, it is at the end. No, that's labor. Here's the lowest price, yep. So this is the lowest extent. So here's the lowest individual pricing, $24,458. The lowest wholesaler was pretty close to that. He was at $24,878.
So low risk in a way on this one.
In this one, but not as, that may not always be the case. There may be a big jump from that to the other. Good question. Thank you.
And then a couple of people, and this may not be in the scope of this particular webinar, but asked if, how do you upload, how do they upload their local supplier prices?
For custom pricing?
Yes, I believe so.
The mechanics of doing it are relatively easy. The logistics of doing it are a little bit different, because you have to find the contact person and source at your suppliers who can provide that data to you. The data is very simple. We need that UPC number I mentioned, that 11-digit number, and we need a price, and we need a unit of measure per each, per 100, or per 1,000. And it's a very simple file format. You can send you a sample of the file, or we can send you your supplier a sample of the file if they're not familiar with it. Most of them are these days, more are than aren't. But basically what you do is you get that file and you download it into Epic. I'm not going to go through all the steps at this point. It takes a couple minutes to do it. It's not very interesting to watch it, but you download that file into Epic. It creates the column and puts the prices in there that I showed you earlier. So the end result is it will look like this. But there's an option here under custom prices to import the file. That's where you bring the file in. And then depending on the supplier, they may send you a new file once a week, once a month, once a quarter, or they may just make it available online. I know there's a number of suppliers who do that. So 24/7 you can go in and pull down your latest file with pricing. Okay. Does that kind of cover that issue, Derek?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, in addition, you can use our tech support
Absolutely.
to help you with that process, and they'll give you pointers and maybe even who to contact at your supplier. And then they could also help you step through the first one.
Absolutely. We'll help you step through setting it up. And if they send you a file and it isn't the right format, we can actually usually fairly quickly edit the file to the right format, send it back to you or to them so they know what the file is supposed to look like. And usually that, after that happens once or twice, the supplier can take it from there.
And then if you maybe briefly touch on what happens if the supplier changes the brand.
The brand.
The brand, the vendor of the product.
Well, what will happen, and this is a generic item, a commodity like conduit, but so if they change the brand of, let's say, fittings they use, is that what he's asking? You think that's the question, Derek?
Oh, he didn't say a specific. Yeah, that's the question. Is just a product brand.
Then you would
nothing specific.
Okay, so if your estimating system has Rayco fittings, for example, and they change to Steel City, then really you have to go into your estimating system and change the UPC numbers, otherwise they won't be updated any longer. So it does impact you when they change those items if they change the brand on some of the items. Now, a lot of the suppliers cover the major brands, so it isn't usually a major issue, but there might be some cases where you need to go in and actually put the brand in that corresponds to your local supplier.
You're asked to repeat that or clarify. I don't know. Do you want to try
that again?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's take an item in EBM. Let's see if we can get over there. Here's a 20 amp spec rate switch. Okay. Got the wrong item. Try it again.
Also, we will be offering this video as a recording to our attendees.
Okay, so in our estimating program, Electrical Bid Manager, this is a 20 amp spec rate switch. This is the manufacturer and catalog number that is in the program. If your wholesaler doesn't carry that Leviton item, then you would have to come in here and replace it with the brand and the catalog number that they do carry. Otherwise, it won't be updated in your estimating database from that supplier. Epic will still update the item, no matter what brand or part number you have. But if you want it to be integrated with the custom pricing, you would have to have it match the supplier's part number here.